What's up, Ancestral Minion? What do you do when people around you shame you, judge you, make comments, actively argue with you? I don't have all the answers to this. I do have some strategies and some thoughts on it though. Because if you're doing something like a carnivore diet, or if you just want to even pack your lunch and bring it to work every day while everyone is just getting the cheap, easy, convenient food, you're going to get these bouts of criticism, of comment, of shame, of judgment, people cracking jokes at your expense. And depending on your constitution, who you are, sometimes they'll roll off your back, sometimes they'll get to you, sometimes you might snap back. And there's just overall not a good strategy for dealing with this. It's not like you're taught this in school. It's not like anybody teaches this ever for the most part. So let's just chat about some ideas around shame and nutrition. So let's first establish one thing. Humans always criticize something that somebody does or says that's contrary to what they do or say, especially when it's a closely held belief. Now, there's obviously a range of this. There's a spectrum for all of these things. Some people want to believe that plant-based is good for you. Some people want to believe that eating animals is bad for you. Some people don't really care. Some people want to feel good about eating their bagel and their bread and their whatever. Some people want to convince themselves that, well, they're skinny, so it doesn't matter what they eat. You have to understand that the human psyche is designed in a way to maintain status quo based on a tribal setting, right? So when people do things, they built a life where they do things consistently. They have a certain group of friends and family and whatever, and they eat a certain way, and they've probably been doing that for a long time. If you come in and do something or say something that challenges that status quo, this creates cognitive dissonance. Right? So anytime somebody tells you like facts and you think this and they come at you with facts or whatever, the reason facts don't work is because that cognitive dissonance, it like short circuits the brain. People then get in defensive mode and then they use ad hominem attacks and straw man and all these logical fallacies and they just basically sidestep the fact because it's too painful for their ego, for their brain to address it and try to understand it and then maybe even potentially change their mind. 99% of people on the planet are not interested in changing their mind. They're only interested in finding things in the world that support what they already do and believe. Is it any wonder that the world of 2020 and the political system we have and all the absurdity of America and really around the world at this point, is it any surprise that this is how humans are designed, where they actively try to discredit information that challenges them and they actively seek out anything that supports what they believe? Is it any surprise that you get this behavior? Is it any surprise that we have the world we have? So how this relates to nutrition, I'll give you an example. So a friend of mine, Bruce, used to work out at a CrossFit gym back in Florida. He was easygoing guy, good demeanor, could be intense at times, but overall fun guy to be around, soft-spoken, and otherwise just not somebody that you would dislike. Well, he got heavily into CrossFit and wanted to be the best. Like he was just like, I'm full blown into this nutrition, training, no matter what, I'll do whatever it takes. And so we helped him along with his diet and he started eating more of a kind of animal-based, high-fat, kind of a paleo style way of eating. And he got crazy results. He got super fit, super fast in the gym, looked great, felt great, best shape of his life. He was a firefighter. So what did he start doing? Well, at the firehouse, you all go and, eat together in some area, I assume. And most of the guys will probably have either something that they got takeout, like around the corner, like maybe somebody goes and gets fast food for everybody, or you have like crap in a package, or maybe there's like some stuff on the shelf, who knows? Bruce started bringing his own food. And what did they do? They all made fun of him. This wasn't really in like one of those classic like underdog shame story ways, because he was friends with everybody. They were obviously like kind of a brotherhood, but you know how it goes. People will always challenge something that is contrary to the cohesion of the group, and the cohesion of the group is based on similar behaviors and thought patterns. So him coming in and just unpacking his lunch, just not really trying to draw any attention to himself, that cannot go unaddressed. And so you'll have shame, you'll have ridicule, you'll have judgment, you'll have wisecracks, and generally most people start with jokes and kind of like an easy way. And to some extent, people might be more aggressive and whatever. It just depends on a lot of different variables. Now I'm gonna give you an evolutionary reason for why this is. And then, I don't know, maybe some strategies for dealing with it, because I don't really have a ton, because like I would tell people to shut the F up. Like that's just my personality. I don't really have a lot of friends that don't eat this way. And if I do, they kind of accept like this is what I do because maybe I put it out there publicly. I don't know. It just never becomes a thing for me. And, in the household, we all eat this way. We all understand. I'm kind of like, the expert in that regard for the most part, and the one who, knows the most about cooking, etc. So I'm always kind of looked up to as a person that you look to for advice, nutrition, food, whatever. So I don't really have a lot of this in my current living, but I can totally see how people that have jobs, coworkers, and just a certain personality, I could see how people will be more willing to speak up and shame and joke and ridicule and do things like that to other people. I do empathize with that, and I want to figure out some ways that maybe you can combat that. But let's first give you an example from hunter-gatherers. So I don't have the source for this. I read this a long time ago, and it always stuck with me. It basically went like this. There's a process known as shaming the meat, and I believe it was an African tribe that was observed. Maybe it was in the 60s or 40s or 20s. I don't know when it was, but it was relatively modern. So obviously it's not an example of what it would have been like 10,000 years ago, but a lot of these hunter-gatherer peoples that we've observed have been untouched by society. So it can give us a pretty accurate representation of what it was probably like through the bulk of our existence as hunter-gatherers. This process is known as shaming the meat. So let's say the men went out to hunt for the day and they went on their separate ways, and one guy came back with a big chunk of meat. Maybe he killed a hog and he's carrying it over his shoulder. It was expected, and again, this is an observation of one tribe, but I assume this is probably something that would have happened in a lot of different tribes, and they all kind of developed their own customs, and it's really the same principle of making sure nobody rises up, keeping everybody thinking the same, because that's how a group survives. You cannot have revolutionaries or free thinkers or iconoclasts in a group of 40 mixed-sex hunter-gatherers. It doesn't work, right? So we've developed these mechanisms to all think the same. And you can look at psychology, the madness of crowds, the political system, the mask swearing, shaming. Like literally, this is evolutionary psychology and biology explains everything. And it's actually surprised me that it's not more of a understood and promoted topic, but that just is what it is. So this idea of shaming the meat, it was expected that the hunter would come back and he would immediately start shaming his kill. He would immediately say, well, I did my best, guys, but this pathetic chunk of meat, maybe it'll ease your appetite a little bit. I'm sorry, I'll do better next time. Like he was meant to, no matter how big the kill is. And in fact, it was even proportionate so that the bigger the kill, the more he was supposed to shame the meat. And so the anthropologists called this shaming the meat. He was expected to come in and immediately start shaming his kill, right? Because they don't want anybody to become a big man or get an ego or anything like that. They know the dangers of that. The rest of the tribe members, women, men included, would engage in this shaming and would make fun of his kill. And they might support what he was saying or say their own thing or saying like, this pathetic piece of meat, couldn't you do better than that? Like, it's really fascinating. Imagine this going on and people being obviously serious, but like there's also a level of intelligence where you kind of like realize it's kind of BS. But if you do it enough, you get to the point where it becomes reality. And the shame, the ridicule is meant to keep people on the same level. And this is why ideas of socialism, not to take a huge political tangent here, but this is why the ideas of socialism are so appealing to people. They just don't work in practice. But aside from that, they appeal because it's about equality for all. Humans believe in equality for all. It's an evolutionary mechanism built into our species. It just doesn't work in a modern environment with lots and lots and lots of people. Like when you become anonymous and you get all the dangers of that, of theft, of killing, of rape, of pillage, like you can't have a utopian egalitarian society when you have like millions or billions of people. It doesn't work, but I won't get into that today. So back to how this applies to when you do things that might challenge the status quo. People have a built-in evolutionary mechanism to shame you, to make fun of you, to criticize you, especially when it's an established narrative in their group or society. Now, you can probably think about 2020 and see how this is playing out. But at the independent level, if you want to eat food and your family's not on board, it's going to be really hard. If you want to eat well and your roommates expect you to go to lunch and dinner and go out Friday nights and drink and whatever every week, and that's what you do, it's going to be really hard. They're going to pressure you. They're going to make fun of you. They're going to throw those little subtle wisecracks in there. They're going to do things that try to return you to the status quo. That's what humans want. They want to do what they already do and believe what they already believe. This is why anything that's new is always ridiculed and shamed. Always. You can even see books written about this, how new technology is even done so. They tried to fight the radio, and they tried to fight the TV, and they tried to fight the internet, and on it's going to go. Humans don't like change. They like egalitarian status quo. So what I want you to mostly understand from this video is understand this is human nature. Maybe you can detach from the emotional side of it a little bit. We all love those good underdog movies where there's always a bad guy that shames somebody or whatever. And that does happen in real life. And people can be pretty nasty and they can bully and they can do all these things. But these are all byproducts of human nature and our evolutionary past. So when you understand that, you can mitigate it more effectively than just trying to say, you're bad, I'm good, and just creating the polarization of us versus them. Because when you get to that point, relationships can break down and it can cause more problems than it's worth. whatever. So for the most part, shrug it off, maybe joke back, maybe come up with some rote lines like, I'm going to lose 20 pounds and I'm going to do it in 3 months. And this is what I got to do. Shrug your shoulders, just look at them. Let them look stupid if you need to. I don't even think you need to go to that point, but for some people you might. And memorize some lines, some responses, have a couple rote things, maybe even consider having conversation and saying, hey, will you support me on this? Like use the Socratic method, use consistency bias. Say, hey, will you support me on this? This matters to me a lot. It's for my health, come up with some reasons why or whatever, and say, will you support me? And if you're in a one-on-one situation and you get them to say yes, watch how it flips immediately. And that's consistency bias. We have other things built into our species that I won't go into today, like reciprocity, consistency. When we say something, it's really hard to change our tune or try to go against that. And obviously we know why that is, and we can see that all throughout society and politics and whatever. So use the Socratic method, try to get people to support you rather than becoming combative, and you're probably gonna have more success. So these are some ideas to help you think about how to change your diet, whether it's carnivore or whatever it is. Maybe it's just packing your lunch and not eating out with your coworkers. These are some strategies to help you with the inevitable shame, ridicule, and judgment that are going to come your way. Like, subscribe, share. If you haven't, I appreciate it. I'll see you in the next one. Hey, Colin here. Got a freebie for you. Click on the button below to go to the ancestralmind.com and download the 7 Principles of Living Wild. This is a short PDF that's got some of the main principles, such as real food, sleep, movement, and a couple more that are going to help you live more ancestrally in accordance with your genes.